Hello, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of the Sharma Show. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you. So there's always been this narrative that the Arab world and the Muslim world initially came up with all these discoveries, and they passed on these discoveries onto Europe, which eventually led to the ushering in of the European Renaissance.
Wrong.
But in this prevalent narrative, what a lot of people don't realize is that these discoveries that are being attributed to the Muslim world are actually translations of earlier work that had already been done in either Greece or India. Now look, I'm not here trying to say that the Muslim world initially did not achieve anything, did not do anything, they were useless. I'm not here to say that. What I'm here to say is let's give credit where credit is due. The Islamic world initially translated a lot of these works that were done in Greece and India, and then of course added to it, and then they were also responsible for transmitting this information to Europe. Usually in popular discussions internationally, India doesn't get close to the credit that it deserves for coming up with the concepts and with the discoveries that it did, and they're often wrongfully attributed to the Islamic world. So this video is going to be an attempt to give credit where credit is due. Visited Baghdad and carried with him a small library including a book titled Surya-Siddhant and works of Aryabhat and Brahmagupt. The Caliph of Baghdad, Al-Mansur, charged Al-Fazari with the translation into Arabic of the works of Aryabhat and Brahmagupt. This translation later became famous as the Sindhind al-Kabir. Influence of Ptolemy's Almageste, as well as the results of the observations that were made by the astronomers of the House of Wisdom of Baghdad were also found in these translations. Al-Karaji paid much attention to addition, subtraction, and to the extraction of square roots of irrational numerical polynomials, matters in which the Indian mathematician Bhaskar also distinguished himself. These concepts were also present and were explored in the Kuttaka Ganit by Brahmagupt. It is Al-Karaji himself who informs us that in his calculations he had followed the method used in the Indian reckoning, or the Hisab al-Hind, to extract square roots of known quantities, that is, of numerical polynomials. As-Samawal, who was an ardent disciple of Al-Karaji, also attributed the method of division of two algebraic polynomials to the Indians. One of the great original mathematicians of Islam and one of the most celebrated scholars of the House of Wisdom at Baghdad, Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi, he also edited two versions of the Sindhind al-Kabir. The importance of al-Khwarizmi's translations and his work for the history of mathematics both in the East and the West cannot be underestimated. It was this book that gave decimal numeration the eminent place that it has since occupied. In this work, we also find the origin of the word algorithm, used today to designate any operational recipe in a given calculus, and we also find the word that has become synonymous with the most essential fields of mathematics known as algebra, which is translated today as algebra. In his translations and in his work, Al-Khwarizmi has explicitly stated that he borrows from Indian concepts. He explains the system of numeration of the Hindus, who use 9 letters for all their numbers thanks to a method which is peculiar to them. This is an explanation of the decimal system where, as everyone knows, each of the 9 digits that compose it, designated by a letter, has a particular value according to the position that it occupies. That of units, tens, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands. The zero, in fact, here is a placeholder as much as a number. It moves other numerals to the left by 1 place, thus increasing their magnitude by a factor of 10. Zero was thus both an idea and an actual number. Al-Khwarizmi also provided a definition of a function of zero, which again he said that he had borrowed from the Indian methods. He said that any zero that is multiplied by any number whatsoever is nothing. That is, no number results from it, that anything that is multiplied by a zero is also nothing. When Arab and Persian thinkers learned about zero, they transliterated the word in Sanskrit Shunya into a roughly corresponding Arabic sifr. In the early 1100s, when Arabic works were first translated into Latin, the Adelaide of Bath called it Sifre. A century after that, Fibonacci called it Zephyr. This new style of numeration in the way of the Indians made its way to Spain, from where it traveled to Europe and was translated into Latin in 1126. This work revolutionized the study of mathematics and sciences and replaced the cumbersome Roman numerals. It is interesting to note that while Europe has christened the new system as Arab numerals, the Arab called them Hindasa, or the Indian numerals. Al-Khwarizmi also talked about other calculation methods of the elementary arithmetic operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, the extraction of square roots, multiplication of decimal and sexagesimal fractions, duplication and dimidiation. These were all functions which had been borrowed from India. Brahmagupta, another famous Indian mathematician and astronomer who was also credited with helping develop the decimal system, the 10-digit base 10 system of numbering that serves the world as the alphabet of all calculation. As mentioned before, it had been mislabeled for several centuries in the West as Arabic numerals, but it was conceived in India and transmitted to the Middle East even before the rise of Islam. Prior to the introduction of numerals from India, the Islamic world expressed numbers through a system of letters much like the Roman numeral system. In fact, the Indians had some astronomical sizes for their numbers. In one of the largest numbers that they came up with was called the Dhwaja Grani Shamani, which was 1 followed by 421 zeros. They had also come up with some very, very small numerations as well. One of the earliest documents describing this Indian medium of calculation is an 11th century work by scholar and judge Sayyid al-Andalusi of Cordoba titled Tabakat al-Umam, also known as the Book of the Categories of Nations. Seen as the world's first history of science, al-Andalusi's compendium credits the Indus Valley for great strides in the study of numbers. The famous historian al-Biruni that traveled to India also wrote that the Hindus do not use the letters of their alphabet for numerical notation, as we use Arabic letters in the order of the Hebrew alphabet. The numerical signs which we use are derived from the finest forms of the Hindu signs. The Arabs too stop with the 1,000. Those, however, who go beyond the 1,000 in their numerical system are the Hindus. Even the sine and cos functions of trigonometry were important mathematical concepts imported from India via translation of texts like the Aryabhatiya and the Surya Siddhanta from Sanskrit into Arabic, and then from Arabic to Latin, and then transmitted into Europe. Even in astronomy, there were many things that the Arabs borrowed from the Indians. Al-Biruni himself wrote that the Indians had a concept that the planet was round. He said after reading Brahmagupta that none of the astronomical observations are correct unless we assume the globular shape of heaven and earth. Therefore, we must declare that heaven is a globe, and the observation of these characteristics of the world would not be correct unless in reality it were a globe. And Al-Biruni also mentioned how the Indians believe that the earth is the one that is actually moving around the sun. He also talks about how the Indians believe that there is a force that is keeping all things attracted to the center of the earth. Brahmagupta's work gained popularity and influence in the Middle East, where calculating solar and lunar cycles and positions was part of workday routines, and it was translated more than once into Arabic. Just like the British used Greenwich as the prime meridian, Brahmagupta in his work used the city of Ujjain as its prime meridian. And even in a lot of the Arabic works initially, when it was first translated from India, Ujjain was kept as the prime meridian. This was also done by Al-Khwarizmi in the Zij al-Sindhind. Al-Fazari also translated Brahmagupta's Brahmasput Siddhant, which provided mathematic evidence for calculating planetary epicycles and their positions and even diameters of the sun, earth, and the moon. Severus Sabocht, a 7th century Syrian bishop and natural philosopher, wrote about the knowledge of the Indians. He said, "Their subtle discoveries in the science of astronomy, discoveries which are more ingenious than those of the Greeks and the Babylonians. Their valuable method of calculation, their computing that surpasses description. I wish only to say that this computation is done by means of 9 signs. If those who believe, because they speak Greek, that they have reached the limits of science, then they should know these things." Again, it is important to give credit where credit is due. Indian scientists and Indian mathematicians and Indian astronomers and Indian medical scientists had come up with some groundbreaking discoveries that had formed part of the basis for the modern scientific revolution, and it is very important that the credit is given where credit is due. I'm not doubting that the Muslim world obviously added to this knowledge, but it is very important to remember that a lot of this knowledge was initially transmitted from India to the Arab world and then from there to Europe. Again, guys, thank you very much for watching today's episode. Let me know what you thought about today's episode in the comment section down below as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to give this episode a thumbs up. Please make sure to give it a like. And also, if you enjoy what we do here on the Sharma Show, you can go ahead and subscribe to the show's channel down below or over here. I will see you for the next episode, and until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you soon.